Well, here we go with this week's news and notes with two more free plays. Remember, last Wednesday we gave you Western Michigan minus the points over Bowling Green. And how about Rutgers plus the points over Liberty, an outright upset winner, pointing out the fact that Rutgers can score points in non-conference games, just not Big Ten games. So let's hope we get another 2-0 for you. I've got two more free plays for you on today's tape. We're going to go through and touch on a lot of different topics, of course, today, give you all the news and notes. I just went through all the different games all week long and came up with some interesting notes as I was going through them, and I'm going to share all that stuff with you today. I do want to remind you on YouTube, if you go to the philsteele.com front page, you can click on YouTube channel right here. And this gets you all of our ones that have been put up here during the week. You can just click and watch them. Also, remember to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Hit the bell so we remind you whenever we put them out there. And give us a like. And also tell us if there's something you'd like to see. Had a couple of notes they'd like to see more NFL information. And that's where we're going to start today. We'll touch on some NFL information for you. So we'll go right here to the NFL info page. And a couple of topics for you. We've got the NFL strength of wins. Now, right here, we got daily blogs that we put up. We'll click on that one for the strength of wins. Now, what this does, for every opponent you defeat, you get credit for their wins. Yes, the New England Patriots are undefeated, but they've only beaten teams that have won 15 games this year. Look who's number one. How about the New Orleans Saints? They've beaten opponents that have won 27 games this year. The Packers only have 7 wins, but they have beaten opponents that have won 26 games this year. The other undefeated team, San Francisco, is 17 wins for their opponents. Indianapolis is right up there, and Kansas City. Both of those only have 5 wins, but are right up there with 17 wins for their opponents. I think this is fascinating. If you go down here below, you see Washington's got 1 win, but they get no credit. Miami hasn't won a game all year, so they get credit for 0 wins, the same as your winless teams down at the bottom. Also interesting to note here, the Pittsburgh Steelers have 3 wins this year. All 3 wins have come against, or have totaled, the 3 opponents they beat have totaled just 3 wins this year. Meanwhile, look at Atlanta and the Jets. They only have 1 win, but their opponents have won 4 games, more than Pittsburgh, more than Arizona. So I think the chart's fascinating, and it's updated each and every week right on philsteele.com. And let's take a look now at another NFL chart for you. And if you go under NFL info here, and you can click on the offensive and defensive YPG versus opponent average. And when we go there, this tells you how they're doing in the averages. And these are the same things that are in the magazine every year, same things that we put on the college page. This tells you how they do against the opponent average. So you can see here, this is the Buffalo Bills this week. They actually held or put up 162 yards more per game than what the New England Patriots have been giving up all year. They had 375 yards against them, so that's pretty interesting. Last 2 games, not so much. Miami only 305 yards. That was the 6th best any team's done against Miami, 135 below what they normally allow. And then against Philadelphia, 253 yards, 107 yards per game below what they allow. So let's go take a look and see what this chart has for you as far as the records. And we see that at the top is the San Francisco 49ers. They are plus 146.9 yards per game over their opponent averages. That takes the offensive average, where they're plus 24, plus the defensive average, where they're plus 121. I find that fascinating. The Saints are plus 90. And look at this, the LA Rams. Remember, they were given up for dead when they were 3-3, but they are plus 67.1, the 3rd best in the NFL. I pointed it out 3 weeks ago. I said, watch these Rams. They're 30-1 odds to win the Super Bowl. They're still 25-1 to win the Super Bowl. This is a team that was in the Super Bowl last year, playing right here at the top, plus 67.1 yards per game, right up there, even ahead of what New England's doing this year, ahead of Minnesota. So keep your eyes on the Rams still as one of those future bets. I would expect that this 25-1 will keep dropping as the Rams' victory totals keep rising. They've been playing a lot better the last 2 weeks. And if we look at them here, beating Cincinnati and Atlanta, of course, 2 weak teams. We'll see what they do against Pittsburgh this week. But the losses to San Francisco, Seattle on the road. So keep your eyes on them for the season. All right, let's take a look at the college strength of wins now. We got the strength of wins for the NFL. Take a look at the college strength of wins and come over here. And we see everybody says Ohio State hasn't played anybody, but the opponents they've beat have totaled 33 wins against FBS foes. Now, if you win a game against an FCS foe, it's not counted. Ohio State still remains number one. LSU has played that 3 top 10 teams there and defeated them all. They are at 27 wins for the season. Penn State's right there with them, 27 wins. Look what Penn State just did the last 3 games. If we click on them, a ridiculous stretch for Penn State. They played at Iowa, home against Michigan, and then at Michigan State. That was a backs-to-the-wall game for Michigan State. I thought the Spartans would play well last week. They did not. Penn State took that gauntlet of 3 games, and now they've got another big one, Minnesota. You know, if they beat the Gophers this week, I believe the Gophers have 8 wins, so that would give Penn State all the way up to 35. We'll have to see how that goes this week, but Penn State could be climbing the charts quite a bit. Clemson has opponents 23 wins. Michigan has defeated opponents that have 21 wins this year. That's the 5th best, despite the fact they only have 6 wins. They've beaten some pretty decent foes. SMU's up here at 20. Wisconsin's up here at 20. Auburn has got a couple of losses. They're still up here at 20. Here's your Gophers. They have 8 wins, but their opponents only combined for 19 wins on the season. Alabama's down here at 18. They have 8 wins, but their opponents have only won 18 games combined so far this year against FBS foes. So that chart's available to you each and every week right there on philsteele.com. An interesting college game we're going to take a look at right now. This is not a selection, but something I wanted to point out when I was going through the games. Try to point out some interesting things to you. UTEP is playing North Texas this week, and you figure it's going to be a huge blowout. Actually, I think I always put the home team on the left, or on the right. So I'm going to put the home team on the right, visitor on the left. The one thing I found interesting, you would expect North Texas, this juggernaut, is actually 3-5 this year, and North Texas's defense is giving up on the season in conference play 470 yards per game. UTEP only 428 yards per game. So that's pretty interesting because UTEP's getting 23 points here. In fact, if you look at the average game grades over the last 4 weeks, and we added that this week, you see the last 4 weeks, you know what the average game grades are. They have nothing to do with your team. They only have to do with your opponent, what you do, yards rushing, yards passing, defensive rush, defensive pass yards, and, of course, the all-important points. UTEP the last 4 weeks is playing at a 70 level, North Texas at an 80 level. That says North Texas should be about a 13-point favorite, and they're a 23-point favorite. Now, it's tough because you look at UTEP and their quarterback situation. Their quarterbacks have combined for 4 touchdown passes, hitting 51.8%. North Texas got Mason Fine, who's hitting 63% with 20 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. But, like I pointed out, UTEP's got some things in their favor this week, which might be interesting. And last year when these two played, and I like to show you how to use Phil Steele Plus while we're doing this. If you go over here to last year's game, you could see at a glance that it was only 27-24 last year was the final score. In that one, UTEP got a touchdown with 5:05 left. They actually had the ball on the North Texas side of the field at the 24 in the fourth quarter after this, down 3 with the chance to tie. Didn't get it done, but the yards were only 428 to 417. Once again, if you click on the team name that's highlighted here, you get the history of the series, and if you click on the word box, you get the actual box score from last year. And let's take... Oh, and those opponent averages. Let me go back to that. I have one note that I wanted to share with you in the opponent averages on Phil Steele. Let's go to the home page and NFL opponent averages. And I found this interesting as well. Opponent averages. The one team at the top that doesn't belong is 2-5 Tampa Bay. So they may be an under-the-radar team. They're 2-5, but they're actually plus 41.9 in the yards per game this year. And then if you go down below, which team doesn't belong? Well, the Buffalo Bills are 5-2, but they're actually minus 15.4 despite playing a soft schedule. So Buffalo might be a play against team in future weeks. Tampa Bay could be a play on team. Keep your eyes on those teams coming up. Now let's take a look at a college matchup. Once again, this is not an official selection, but something I found interesting going through the matchup this week. And I'm going to call this one the Disappointment Bowl. Miami of Florida against Florida State. Now, both teams come in with mediocre records. I mean, Miami comes into this thing 4-4. Florida State comes into this thing 4-4. But this could very easily be 8-0 against 7-1. Look at Miami's records. They lost to Florida by 4 a game they had a yardage edge. They lost to North Carolina by 3. They led Florida in the fourth quarter. They led North Carolina in the fourth quarter. They lost to Virginia Tech by 7. They lost to Georgia Tech. That's a game where they gave Georgia Tech a fumble return touchdown, a fake punt touchdown. They missed 3 field goals and somehow lost this thing in overtime. Still scratching my head over that. They're basically, if you change one major play in each of these games, they're 4 plays away from being an 8-0 team. And when you look at Florida State, the reason I bring it up and call it the disappointment ball is you get to Florida State and it's much the same. Boise State, once again, click on the box score. Florida State leads this thing 31-19 in the fourth quarter and lose. Then against Virginia, click on the box score. They led this thing 24-17 in the fourth quarter and lose. And then you go to the Wake Forest game. And Wake, if you watch the game, they really were controlling almost the entire game. But you look at this at the end of the line, despite a 28-20 first down edge, led it 20-19 in the fourth quarter, gave up this field goal and missed a field goal at the end. They're 3 plays away from being a 7-1 team. They're 4 plays away from being an 8-0 team, and yet we're stuck here with 4-4 Miami against 4-4 Florida State. Once again, not a selection. I find it difficult to play on either team in a disappointment bowl like this, but thought I would point it out to you because I found it interesting going through the week. Another thing I want to point out to you is that the Maxwell Award and the Bednarik Award have been announced this week. And I posted them here, the 20 finalists for each. Very proud to be a member on the committee, the voting committee for it. The Bednarik Award and the Maxwell Award. The top 20 offensive player, top 20 overall players is the Maxwell Award. Top 20 defensive players is the Bednarik Award. Check those out on my Twitter. And you can also check out this myriad of injuries I post. I go through the injuries all day long. You get all the latest injuries right here on my Twitter. It's at Phil Steele 042. So if you want to know who's going out, I was wondering, is Robeson going to play for Florida Atlantic? Go look it up. Here it is. Robeson is expected to start for Florida Atlantic this week. So if I wonder about any injuries or if the injury story pops up in front of me, I go ahead and post it here, and you get all the latest injuries. You could circle your magazine, all these players that are out for the year, and then you'll see at a glance which teams have suffered numerous injuries and which ones are fairly healthy when it gets to be the end of the year. Well, it's that time of day again for my Wednesday section, and I've got to go on my Clemson rant again. The things I hear in the national media, this is all the stations, on the radio, everywhere. Clemson, first of all, hasn't been playing that well this year. Total garbage. They are playing great this year. They've had one bad game, North Carolina. This one right here, they struggled to win. They blew out Georgia Tech 52-14, and I believe Georgia Tech even scored a fourth quarter touchdown. They got 90 of their yards in the fourth quarter on a late drive. Total domination. Texas A&M 24-3. Once again, click on the box score. A&M gains 91 of their yards. They had under 200 yards offense. They drive 91 yards and get a touchdown with 6 seconds left against the Clemson backups and only lose 24-10. Did Clemson struggle? No. Syracuse on the road, a team that's given them all kinds of problems. Another thing I hear is, well, Clemson's not playing as well as last year. Hey, last year they barely got past Texas A&M by 2. They barely got past Syracuse. They needed a fourth down conversion to get past this game. They weren't playing great last year. They were playing good. They played a weaker schedule last year. This year they're playing better teams, and they just dominated Syracuse 41-6. Charlotte, they played 110 players and beat them 52-10. Florida State, they led that thing 42-0. Louisville, 45-10. Why are you saying they didn't play well? Because their quarterback threw a couple of interceptions? Threw a couple of interceptions, they still won by 35. And Boston College last week, 59-7, total domination. So all of their games have been total domination. Look at this defense. Their defense has held their opponents to season lows in every single one of their games, with the exception of that Georgia Tech game where they gave up that 90-yard drive. It was the second low of the season. So other than that, they've held their opponents to season lows. They have a great defense. They're giving up just 246 yards per game, 2.9 yards per carry, 47% completions. They run the ball extremely well. They got one of the best running backs in the country. They average 6.5 yards per carry. Their offensive line doesn't give up any sacks, just 6 all year. Trevor Lawrence has thrown 8 interceptions. That's why everybody thinks that this team is really struggling. But, guys, if it's a big game and you have to pick a quarterback, aren't you going to take Trevor Lawrence? I would. He's shown me that he can win in big games. And maybe he's just taking a few too many chances early in the year. And 8 interceptions in 8 games is not horrific. It's not like he's thrown 20 interceptions. So this team is much better than you would think. And if you compare them, let's go ahead and compare them to Alabama, the team everybody had number 1 last year. You see all these green here for Clemson? There's actually some red for Bama. They couldn't run the ball against South Carolina. Gave up 459 yards to South Carolina. That was the 7th worst of any team that played South Carolina this year. Gave up 476 yards to Ole Miss, 279 yards on the ground. You don't see anything like that over here with Clemson, do you? And that is 48 yards above what they normally allow. They're number 19 in the country in that category. If you look offensively, Clemson's averaging 122 yards per game above what their opponents allow, right where Alabama is, 130, but their defense is a lot better. They're number 1 in the country, holding opponents to 184 yards per game below their season average. I heard that, well, Clemson's played a lot of close games. Well, Clemson's played 1 close game. LSU, for example, they got by Texas by 7. Texas has not really proven to be a top 10 team. Florida was closer than the final and took on Auburn and only beat them by 3. They did have a nice yardage edge in the game, but they've got some red numbers here. Texas got them for 530, Florida for 457, number 7. They failed to run the ball against Mississippi State. Are you going to take NTN or are you going to take Edwards-Helaire? And once again, a big game, I'd probably go with Trevor Lawrence. Now, Ohio State's put up tremendous numbers this year, and they're just like Clemson. But, 224, 246. They're number 1 in this, holding their opponents below their average. They're number 4. Offensively, Ohio State's there. So you can't really argue with Ohio State being up there in the numbers. They're all green every week, and they haven't had a close game. Against Wisconsin, it was 10-7 in the third quarter last week, but Wisconsin's a pretty doggone good team. So Ohio State's up there, but for all these people that are saying Clemson is not having a good year, I struggle with it every week, and yet the narrative persists every week on a national basis. All right, let's get to a selection, huh? We're going to talk about Ole Miss playing Auburn this week. We're going to get a selection on this game. Auburn's off a loss. Should be angry, right? At home. Blown out a couple of opponents so far. If you look at their games against middle-of-the-road SEC teams, they blew out Arkansas and they blew out Mississippi State and beat A&M 28-20. But here's a couple facts I want to point out for you. And the reason I'm going to take Ole Miss plus 19 in this game. First of all, Auburn's off a huge game against LSU. And in that game, they only lost by 3, but look at the yardage. They were outgained 508 to 287. They were out first down 30-16 in that game. Somehow managed to stay within 3 points. Normally when you see yards like that, you lose by 17 or so. Now, if you watch the game, they were in the game. They did score a late touchdown to pull within 3, but I thought Auburn played a very good game in Death Valley last week. I'm just saying yardage-wise, it just wasn't there. Then also you have to take a look at the bubble burst factor. Now, many times when a team's thinking national title or playoff, and their hopes die, they have a week's game the next week. Now, a lot of one-loss teams, they haven't had their hopes die. But Auburn, let's face it, it's done. They have 2 SEC losses. They're not going to somehow get past LSU and win the SEC championship this year. And so their chances of a national title are gone. They could become a spoiler. Maybe they knock off a Georgia and Alabama down the stretch, but no national title hopes this year. And I call it the bubble burst factor in that respect. Also, I look at the fact that Mississippi State's fresh off a bye. So they're fresh off a bye. They only have New Mexico State on deck. This is like their A++ game. They're off a big game against LSU last week. And look how Mississippi's running the football. How about 277 yards per game on the ground, 5.7 yards per carry in SEC play? Now, are they going to do that against Auburn's defense? No, they're not going to get 277 yards. But LSU ran for 187, so they may have some success on the ground, which could keep this one closer than expected. And then how about this little note that I found? Let's go to conference yards per game. Ole Miss, now they lost, they're 2-2 in conference play, or 2-3 in conference play this year. They're actually plus 44 yards per game. They played a good game against Bama. They have 476 yards against Bama. Missouri's got a good defense. They had 440 yards on them, 405 against A&M. They are plus 44 yards per game in SEC play. Auburn's plus 12. They got outgained by LSU. They even got outgained by A&M this year. So if you look at yardage per game, that says it's going to be a closer game. And once again, it's 19. I think you have the situation. You have a very good situation here. I like Ole Miss, plus 19 over Auburn this week as the first of your plays here. Let's take a look at another game. And this might be a game to avoid. This is not a selection game, but yeah, I think when you take a look at USC this week, they're playing Oregon. They're getting a little over a field goal at home. USC's a banged-up team, so banged up that Colorado almost beat them last week. And if you look at the average game grades here, and the average game grades are calculated every week just like they're in your magazine, you see Oregon's playing at 108.3 level, USC at a 97.4 level. And Oregon's bandied about as a national title contender, which they are. I still think if they win out, beat a Utah maybe in the Pac-12 title game, they've got a shot at making the playoff, and they are a very good team. But the things I'll point out, and the reason I'm saying you might want to stay away from this game is that this is a USC team that already beat Utah at home. Utah's just as good as Oregon. They beat them at home by 7. Their pass game is nearly unstoppable. Slovis is healthy. You look at their losses. This BYU loss, they started a first-time starting quarterback on the road and lost by 3. Washington, they went down to their third-string quarterback, making his first start on the road. Still had the yardage edge in that game. A couple of blown opportunities in the red zone. And they played Notre Dame within 3 points on the road when Slovis returned. They've got the receiving core with Pittman, Vaughns, and St. Brown to challenge the Oregon secondary. And Clay Helton is 23-3 straight up at home. Mario Cristobal 16-30 straight up on the road. So I can make a case for Oregon. I can make a case for USC. I'm saying this would be a good game to watch. I wouldn't really want to go against either team in this situation. All right, one more thing before I get to your final selection. I found this interesting. There's a lot of talk around the country about a certain quarterback named Love from the Mountain West Conference that is an NFL caliber guy, and he is. I mean, when you look at Jordan Love, he's 6'4", he's 225, he's got the arm, and he had great numbers last year. 32 touchdown passes, 6 interceptions. But you might find it surprising, this year he's got 8 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. And I bring this up, and I found it surprising because I'm going through San Jose State, who, by the way, is also in the Mountain West Conference. They have a quarterback named Love. Now, Love doesn't have the physical attributes that Jordan Love has. He's only 6'2", about 200 pounds. But Josh Love has got 15 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and been a big reason why San Jose is 4-4 this year. So if I'm voting all-conference team right now, I've got Josh Love and not Jordan Love on my first, second, or third all-conference team for the Mountain West Conference. So when you talk quarterbacks named Love in the Mountain West Conference, you might want to talk Josh a little bit over here. He's having a better season. Now, I'll give this to Jordan. They only have 2 returning starters on offense, so you figured they would struggle. And early in the season, they didn't seem to struggle, but the last 4 games they have. You look at 114 yards against Air Force, 13-31 against Nevada. Really poor game against LSU with 3 interceptions. He'll get better. He is still a good quarterback. He's still got those NFL characteristics that had the NFL scouts going on him. But I found it interesting that in the same conference, a quarterback with the same last name is having a much better season statistically this year in Josh Love. Okay, let's get to your final selection, your second selection on Wednesday. Then I should be back with 7 or more selections for you on the Friday tape. And we're going to take a look at a game that I'm calling substance over style. We're going to take a look at TCU and Oklahoma State this week. And when I line up these two teams, Oklahoma State's got the flash. They got Chuba Hubbard, 1,381 yards rushing, 6.4 yards per carry, 16 touchdowns. Tylan Wallace, he'll be in the Blitnikoff mix this year, 903 yards, 8 touchdowns. Spencer Sanders, their quarterback, a dangerous runner with 500 yards, throwing for 1,739 yards. Explosive offense, 505 yards per game. So that's what I would call the style, is Oklahoma State. Now, your substance will go to TCU. They play good defense. In fact, in conference play, they're giving up just 327 yards per game this year. Overall, they're allowing their opponents 132 yards below their season average. Oklahoma State's allowing their opponents 10 yards more than they come in averaging. So that's a pretty significant edge there defensively for TCU. Now, offensively, their quarterback, Max Dugan's not got the big stats. He's not throwing for 1,739 yards. He has run for 233, but that's not 500. But here's the one thing he's done better than Spencer Sanders. 11 touchdown passes, 1 interception. Spencer Sanders has got 10 in the interception category. And those things will hurt you, especially against a Gary Patterson-led defense. So defensively, big edge, TCU. Quarterback makes less mistakes. That goes there. And then when you look at the yards per game in conference play, TCU is actually plus 112 yards per game. Oklahoma State's only plus 14. And yet TCU's the underdog in this game. And then let's throw the angles in. Okay, we've got the fact we've got the better defense. We've got the fact that we have got the quarterback that makes less mistakes. We've got the stats behind us. Now let's throw in the technical angles. How about Oklahoma State? 5-14-2 is a Big 12 home favorite. 5 wins, 14 losses, and 2 ties. They do their best work as a dog, like last week against Iowa State. Underdog, playing a ranked team, they won. Let's go back to last year. Remember, they beat a ranked Iowa, or they lost to an unranked Iowa State. They lost to an unranked Kansas State. They upset Texas. They lost to Baylor, which wasn't ranked. They gave Oklahoma a great game. They beat a ranked West Virginia at home. They lost to a TCU team that came in 5-6. So they lose to teams that they're favored against, but they can win as an underdog. Well, they're off an underdog win, but they're going against a team they're favored against again. They lost to Texas Tech as a favorite. They lost to Baylor as a favorite this year, and now they're a favorite over TCU. And TCU, by the way, about 16-9 against the spread as an away dog. So this one, in my mind, has got it all. I'm calling it substance over style. We're going to go with TCU plus the 3 over Oklahoma State. Couple more notes for you before I get out of here, and I keep forgetting about these. If you want to get Phil Steele Plus and use all this stuff at your fingertips, and by the way, I didn't show you get the last 40 years results. So you go to TCU all the way back to 1976. And get their spread results. If you want to see how TCU has done against Oklahoma State, you click here. See TCU's beat them the last 2 years, both as an underdog. Oh, that's something. 4 straight outright upsets in this series, TCU and Oklahoma State. This at your fingertips for every game. Just click on the opponent right here, and it pops up. 4 straight upsets in every game. If you want to be able to do research like this on your own all the time, just get Phil Steele Plus. Phil Steele Plus is normally $69. Right now, the current price $49, but if you type in the code word winners, it's $44. And if you just want the FCS, it's only $19 right now. Just go to philsteele.com. Right here, go to the store, and right there, click on Phil Steele Plus. Type in the code word winners, $5 off. $44 takes you all the way through the Super Bowl. The other thing I wanted to toss out was the Inside the Press Box. We just dropped the price on the college, by the way. $99 for the rest of the year, but if you type in the code word STEEL19, go to InsideThePressBox.com or right here on the Phil Steele site. Click on Inside the Press Box, either one. Type in the code word STEEL19. You can get the college for the rest of the regular season for just $79. NFL, there's still 11 weeks left. $89 for the rest of the year with the code word STEEL19. If you just want to try an issue, try this week, 50% off. Type in the code word STEEL19 for that. Well, there you have it. I'll be back on Friday with Phil Steele Plus Tour with 7 or more free selections for you. Thanks for watching this one. And don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Have yourself